to raising joyful and resilient Black children. We are so excited to kick off season 3 and continue bringing you essential conversations about parenting, child well-being, and social justice. Our goal, as always, is to provide real tools, evidence-based research, and cultural wisdom that matter to Black families.
That's right. And so today we are very excited to have our guest whose work embodies the power of literacy, fatherhood, and community. Joining us is Khari Arnold, the founder of the Library Dads, a growing movement of fathers in Atlanta who take their kids to the library for what they call library linkups. Through this initiative, they're fostering a love of reading, strengthening father-child bonds, and creating a brotherhood of engaged Black dads. Welcome.
Welcome, Khari. We're happy to have you.
Hey, thank you.
Glad you're here. What are you reading before we get into the questions? What are you reading in your link ups lately? What are some of the titles that have come up?
Ooh, okay. I thought you meant me personally.
Well, you can tell us what you're reading and what the kids are reading in the link up. What are children reading in the link ups?
Okay, I'll start with me. So right now I'm reading a book called Relational Intelligence by Darius Daniels. So obviously I'm in a space now where I'm having to develop a lot of different relationships. And so this book has really helped me to learn how to cultivate that. We talk a lot about emotional intelligence, but not so much about relational intelligence. And so I'm learning the value of relationships. But about the kids and what we're reading to them. At our most recent link up, we had our animals agenda. And so a favorite is Little Blue Truck by Alice Sheretta. Brought that up on the ebook. So we use Hoopla. I want to shout out Hoopla and Libby for ebooks and audiobooks. So we were able to read that. And we also read another book. I think the second book that we read each time, we try to make it about the dad. So a different book, related to a dad, reading to bonding with their kid, or in this case, an animal. It was two lions bonding.
Nice.
And so it's called Thank You, God, for My Daddy. And at the end, we had the kids, repeat after me and ask the question after to name something that, you love about your dad. And it was so many hands went up, and it was just great to see. And, just looking at the dad's faces after the kids, said, I love you. And it was just amazing. That's why we do it.
I love the sound of that. So it sounds like you have a long reading list to share with the young people. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're glad to hear what you're reading, and even more so to hear what the young people are reading, the kids are reading, the children are reading with their dads. And we know, as researchers ourselves, we know that research shows that when dads are really involved, actively involved in their children's reading experiences, it really has a powerful impact on literacy skills and academic success. And I know you may be reading with younger boys and younger children, but from your perspective, why is it so important for fathers to play an intentional role in their child's literacy-specific journey?
Yeah. And it's boys and girls, it's not limited to just boys. But I will just touch on that specifically when it comes to boys. We're very intentional. I'll just talk about the link ups, for example. We're very intentional when it comes to the person who's going to be at the front reading. We do prefer a dad or a male presence because Monday through Friday, a lot of our kids are, being taught by women, right? I think there's 2% of the teachers today are Black men. And so why would a young Black boy, associate reading as something he wants to do if he doesn't see a man, someone who looks like him doing it? But again, we don't just limit it to boys. I have a daughter and we read every day. As for the importance of it, I don't want to inundate the audience with numbers and statistics about our decline in literacy rates, so I won't pivot there. But I will say two things. The home is the child's first classroom. That's one, right? And then two, we can all agree that reading is the foundation of education. You're not going to know how many apples Johnny had, in your math class if you can't read the prompt, right? So given that home is the first classroom, and reading is the foundation of education, we need to read at home, all right? When it comes to dad specifically, I think we have so much, on our plates, so much pressure, so much we want to teach our kids and pour into them, so many hats that we wear even beyond, our father roles. And it can easily feel like time is working against us at times. So that's why for me, I had to create a floor. And reading is not the ceiling for me when it comes to how I want to pour into my child and what I want to teach her. It's the floor. So I read to, my daughter every day. So if I look up and I go, I've been so busy, what have I taught, my child these last 2 weeks? Well, I have a floor where, okay, she was learning simply by me reading to her every day, right? And that's going to apply to when she's 12. So I think, just to summarize your question, an approach that we go by is, we believe more kids will want to read when fathers intervene. And, you touched on it being backed by research, and I can speak on it from an anecdotal standpoint. I've been in the game for 2 years as a parent, but I can just easily list some examples from some of the dads of older kids who have said, hey, since last summer, when we started going to these library linkups, I'm seeing the joy in my child when it comes to how they associate, books and bonding time with me. And I love it. Those are the stories that I love to hear, because, we can talk about the cognitive benefits when it comes to literacy, but we do it for the bonding first. So our 3 pillars is bonding, books, and brotherhood. Mm-hmm. It's in that order intentionally, because that's the best benefit from reading to our kids and with our kids. It's the bonding component. And then we get into the literacy components that, we're able to address as well.
I love that. And, I love that I have an anecdotal story too, but I love that for a few reasons. And we can talk statistics on this show too, because sometimes it's important for our parents and our audience to understand what those statistics look like. And then there's often sometimes assumptions that because a young person can point and click that they can read, we know that's not necessarily true. Those of us who get to work intimately with young people. So the statistics don't hurt. Hopefully they inform and they help. Yeah. And I would say what I love about your approaches, as you said, the bonding element of it, because we will hear read to your child 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day. So the emphasis is on the reading as maybe in a utilitarian way versus like, okay, we have to improve the reading because of the literacy rates versus not only are you improving the reading, but you're connecting with your child. And so I love that your first pillar is we're going to connect with our child, and that connection, we're going to use reading to improve that. So I love that. And I love that it's dads, it's boys, it's girls, all the children. It doesn't matter. They get to hear and connect with their father or fathers through reading. So I love that. And I would say my anecdote as I'm getting ready to pass it over to Sheretta is, I have a little girl. When I was pregnant with her, whenever she would kick, I would ask my husband, can you talk to her and calm her down? And she would calm down when she heard his voice. So he was in the birthing room, and babies, most people may or may not know, are blind for the first 30 days. They can't see. It's just really blurry blobs of space. And as he was talking, literally, she wasn't here 5 minutes, but he started speaking and she looked up and started looking around. And our nurse said, oh my gosh, she recognizes her voice, because he had been talking to her and reading to her before she had made it to this side. And so that bonding is super important. So not just the time spent, but hearing the voice of your father. Right. And we know that. And to this day, she's very close to her father. And so literally the nurses were like, she's looking for where that voice is coming from. Like, he's been talking to her for quite some time. So indeed, the bonding is about the physical touch, the intimacy, which is so important, but also hearing the voice, right? And the voice of fathers is slightly different, or not slightly, is different from the voice and the timbre that we hear from mothers. And, we have a colleague who's in audiology, so I can't get that technical as he does. When I told him that story, he had a technical explanation. I was like, okay. But yeah, so we've got a few more questions for you. So thanks for sharing that. And we love those 3 pillars. So the bonding comes before the literacy, right? So important, and making sure that fathers are having an opportunity to have that relationship in an intentional way and strengthen that relationship in an intentional way.
Yeah. So you discussed with your previous answer, this importance of bonding, right? Of connection. And so the Library Dads is more than just a reading group. It's a community designed to embrace bonding and enhancing learning between fathers and their children. So how have you seen these connections grow, both between dads and their kids and among the fathers themselves?
Yeah, I can go different ways. I think I'll start with the dad. So we had a dad's night out recently last month. We went bowling, which is, it's like bowling, but with a football. It was really unique, really creative. But at the end, one of the dads, we were just talking, and he came up to me and said, look, to be honest, I was at home pretty much depressed before I came across one of you all's videos on TikTok. And, ever since then, I'm really starting to get, that joy back myself. And so hearing that really meant a lot to me. It struck me as a dad. But as for the component between the fathers and the kids, it's a beauty to see, just up close and personal. Sometimes when I'm leading, I just have to step back and just really admire what I'm seeing right now. And we're building lifetime memories, right? And the bonds, like you said, we're strengthening it, but we're helping build, lifetime bonds, create lifelong readers. At the same time, these dads are doing life with the community. So, just like the dad who said he was dealing with a little bit of depression, he needed community. And that's essentially what we are. We're a movement. Yes, we just became an official nonprofit organization, but we still call ourselves a movement. That's how we identify a community, of brothers who are, here for each other. One of our favorite sayings is one thing to have men in your circle. It's another to have men in your corner. And when you're in that boxing ring called fatherhood, you need some men who can push you, who can help you, give you advice, good insights, good connections, good networks. We just put my daughter in daycare, and I found the daycare through a library dad. We were just talking, and that's just the type of connections we've been building. And, like I said, I've been tagged in some posts about dads sharing their stories with their kids, picking up a book at night, and they weren't doing that before. And so it's just seeing that joy that we're cultivating at the library where we're making it fun. We do more than read as well. We implement some other social activities and just make it a holistic, fun, joyful experience. But they're starting to really see, hey, there's joy in these books.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so in addition to the library linkups, you also take group field trips and host dad-only events. So what inspired you to expand beyond reading at the library, and how do these activities further strengthen the father-child bond? And you gave some examples, but give us a little bit more.
Well, like I say, it's the pillars. I want to make sure that we are focusing on each one. So if that third pillar is going to be brotherhood, we have our time with the kids at the library, but we should do something, to foster and develop that brotherhood outside of that space, right? And so that's kind of where some of those events that we talked about, the dad-only events, came about. And then, we have a field trip planned this weekend with the kids. We did another one a few months ago where we took the kids to the Georgia Aquarium, and then we passed out books based on ocean animals, right? Based on, each kid's age as well. So that's a way to be able to create background knowledge and also, showcase the literacy component as well, right? So we got some more stuff planned this summer. We're excited for it to get warm so we can do some things outdoors again. But those components are just as important to me because we have 3 pillars and we want to make sure we're practicing everything holistically.
And do me a favor, Khari, tell us again what the 3 pillars are. Let's have our audience hear that again.
Yeah. So our 3 pillars: bonding, books, and brotherhood. And
bonding, books, and brotherhood.
Yeah, and bonding is first, and that's intentional. It's by design because that's the biggest benefit you'll get from reading to, your child. And I can say that from experience. It's what brought me back to the library every week. So I started taking my daughter to the library when she was 4 months old. And what kept me going back each week, it wasn't the cognitive benefits. It was the constant bonding where I need to get out of the house and I need to do something with my daughter because I wanted to. So I should have mentioned this part too. There's another benefit. Library is free 99.
He said free 99.
Free 99, open right. to anybody, no matter your
that price.
Status. And so if I'm going to be going somewhere every week and it's free, no fee,
I'm going to be going.
I'm there, and she's getting something from, she's getting something from it.
It's free, it's healthy. I love it. It's no coupons needed. It's free 99. Free 99. Free libraries. Please come in. Yes. Bring your child. Yes, love it.
Support. Absolutely.
We do want to ask you a little bit about, how you believe your program is really, the library linkups are addressing stereotypes. But before we do that, can you just tell us how you come up with the bonding activities? Like you say, you have an activity this weekend. You had also talked about the bowling where you use the football. So how do you come up with the activities, especially since you're engaging fathers with both their girls and their boys? Give us an example of how you come up with the activities. Does it come from membership, from you, from the books? And then we'll talk about those stereotypes.
Yeah, I think so. I'm a creative. I think naturally by design is what I do for my career. I'm a content creator. I'm a journalist, sports journalist, and I always have to be thinking of ideas. So I'm always just naturally in that space, if you will, trying to think of ways to be creative. As a reader, you're going to be like that too, right? So I think there's that. But then also, I'll just give an example. Last weekend, we did what we call the library roller coaster, where we pull up a POV of someone in the front seat of a roller coaster, pull it up on the projector, we get some chairs and make a line in front of that projector, right? and the kids sit down in the dad's lap. And so when the roller coaster is going left, we go left. When it turns right, we turn right, and kids are screaming. It's fun. That idea came from TikTok. Like I think I saw that on TikTok or Instagram during the pandemic, when people were just looking for things to do. So I think it's a mix of that, a mix of, me being a father and trying to think of ways I could bond with, my daughter as well. I also have 2 little cousins who don't have their father in their life. And so I've kind of stepped into that role for the last 12 years. So, I was taking them to the library before my daughter was even born, and we were doing activities. So I kind of had that experience of finding ways to engage with children and getting the dads involved as well.
Love it. Sounds wonderful. So you are a lifelong learner and an advocate of the free 99. So we appreciate that. I love that phrase. Sure. So when you think about, even as you said, stepping in and supporting your cousins, being creative, right? Being creative as well as reading and bonding with not only bonding with your daughter, but bonding with the other men in the program, like the examples that you've given. We also know that, unfortunately, there are many harmful stereotypes about Black men and Black fatherhood.
Right.
How do you feel that the Library Dads is reshaping the narrative and showing a different presentation and reality, not just presentation, but reality for fathers?
I love it. I love that we complement that narrative, because it's not the narrative. It's not like we sought out to change that narrative. Like, that's why we exist, right? But it's amazing that that's something we're able to complement, because it is real what you said. And I'll shout out the Dad Gang, because that's their mission, right? Their mission is an organization that was founded in 2016 by a man named Sean Williams. And their mission is to change that narrative. We support that. We pulled up on their march that they had last year. And I remember when we were at the march, my wife picked us up and she saw all the dads there with their kids in the strollers. And she said for her, that was healing, because she lost her dad at a young age. And even, before then, he wasn't around as much, the last few years of his life. And there was, a hole there that she didn't even really realize was still there. Not in terms of her father, but in terms of how she viewed fatherhood. And she said, yeah, it's one thing when I see you every day being a great father, but when I see this huge collection of Black fathers together being active with their kids, it really just helped me. And I validated her saying that. But yeah, also from the component of other races and, stigmas that have been placed on us from others. So we love it. We love that we've been able to, I read the comments, I read the DMs of people saying, hey, this is, so good to see all these Black fathers. We're going to keep complimenting that narrative for sure.
Awesome. I love that. So really complimenting the narrative of being loving and engaging fathers, but really it's a counter narrative to the stereotypes that Black fathers are uninvolved, they're not engaged, they're not emotionally available to their children. So, and sort of, like you said, thinking about the dad game and really showing up in a way that you are really supporting a narrative in these other organizations like the one you mentioned, who are really demonstrating how Black fathers are loving, caring, emotionally connected, and advocates for their children. So very much, you're here, right? You're here and doing those things. Awesome.
And so, Khari, for dads who may not have grown up with a strong reading culture or who feel like unsure about starting to read with their children, what advice would you give them to help build their confidence and to make literacy a meaningful part of their parenting journey?
Great question. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind was, so you realize this is going to be a commitment. We're talking 18 years. And so that gives us time to be able to practice and develop that skill, no matter what the circumstance was, up to why we, may not have that desire or skill when it comes to reading, which is very real, right? Some of it is based on trauma. Like, I just want to address that. One thing we don't believe in is popcorn reading, where we make the kids, you guys remember that game growing up that we were doing in the classroom, right? Back then, I didn't really see too much of a problem with it. But now I'm like, why are we doing that?
Khari,
we're putting...
Yeah, I just want to say and jump in the way we do on the East Coast and say our readers might not remember popcorn reading, right? So describe what popcorn reading is, right?
You're right.
But some people may be like, what's that? You get to eat popcorn and read? So...
So popcorn was, everybody would have their books out. Each student would have, a book out. The teacher would have it out. And so teacher would say, okay, Johnny, I need you to start reading. And then when Johnny is done or whenever he feels like stopping, he says, popcorn, or the teacher says popcorn. And then Johnny picks some other kid on the other side of the room. Angel, I want you to read. And so now it's Angel's turn to read. And she reads a few sentences and she says popcorn. And honestly, I guess it's a way for everybody to get a chance to read, but nobody's focused. I'm not paying attention to the story. I'm waiting to hear if my name's going to get called and I'm going to get popcorn. And so now some anxiety is building up. And I knew how to read, but I can imagine how some kids who, weren't on reading level, there could be fear right there, right? And I remember, when a kid who wasn't as strong as a reader if they would have liked, feeling like they were picked on, if somebody would laugh when their name got called. And so that's trauma, right? And so people carry that, up until they're adults and they're having kids. And so
and probably even just saying popcorn reading for some people probably shudder, to your point. Like, ooh, I remember that. But some other people were really like, what's that? They gave you popcorn to read. So we just needed a clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. No, I think it's just a matter of addressing, the reasoning and then realize, okay, I need to put the work in because I want to do that for my child. If I'm going to invest in my child, I can do this. The libraries, they teach classes, free classes. And I know in my county they do in terms of, helping adults with literacy and reading. Vast amount of programming at libraries. Let me say that as well. If you need help learning how to work a computer, they teach that. So that would, I guess, be the start, and just realize you're making an investment by practicing it. And as you practice and gain your confidence, because I do have a friend who isn't as confident, and I love seeing that he's really trying. Know that there are also tools. There are apps, websites that can help with this as well. Audiobooks. In the meantime, if you want to listen to an audiobook with them and while they're reading, and you can still engage in the conversation and hit pause here and there, that would, be another tip I would suggest.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Those are great tips. I do want to ask a quick question. What's the age range of the children for our listeners who are not in the Atlanta area but saying, hey, that sounds good? What's the age range of the children that dads bring along for the library linkups?
Yeah, 0 to 12, all the kids, and then I'll just share long term. We do want to have a separate Saturday dedicated to teens. We're not there yet, but at some point, we want to call that our TLD teens, where we're teaching them not just literacy from a reading standpoint, but also financial literacy and different life skills, to prepare them for when they get out of school. That's down the line. But right now, we're focusing on 0 to 12.
That's amazing. I love that. I love working with teens. They kept me from getting gray hair. Unfortunately, when I gave that up, the gray hairs came. But I love the 0 to 12, right? So from birth right on up through middle school, which we know can be a difficult time for young people as they transition and get ready to move into high school. So we love that foundation. And that gives, the father and the children a chance to stay with the program versus saying, okay, you're 3 years old now, you got to find something else. Okay, you're 10 years old, you have to find something else. So I imagine that the programming changes and evolves based on the age of the children who are there. So I love that. That sounds wonderful. Awesome. So when you think about library dads and all that you're doing and how it's grown, you now have your 501c3 or your nonprofit status, and you've got this great community in Atlanta. And as we said, our listeners may not be in Atlanta, may not be familiar with it, but do you plan on expanding to other cities? What might it take to bring library linkups to other cities?
1,000%. I mentioned a long-term goal being the TLD teams, but this is definitely a long-term goal as well when it comes to expansion. And when I say long-term, I don't have a timeline on it. We threw out some time frames, but our mission right now is focusing on Atlanta and making sure that we are doing our best here. See, a lot of people don't realize we're only 8 months old, so we're still in the natural gestation period for birthing something. And we want to make sure that we are providing the right blueprint to expand to, other cities. And we need to experience our hiccups, right? So that way, when we go to other cities, we can say, hey, here's what to look for.
We love that analogy as developmental psychologists. We love that analogy. Yeah. You've gained two stronger fans than we were when we started. So thanks so much.
That's right.
Yeah. So our 1 year anniversary will be July 20th. We're going to have like an ultimate library link up the 19th, the day before that Saturday. And then from there, we're like, okay, we got a year under our belt. Let's see what we learned. Let's examine. Let's review our needs assessment. And then, begin to talk about a potential expansion plan. But yes, it is going to happen. We see the DMs, the comments. I know we had a post to go viral recently. And that was one of the main questions. When you come to NYC, can I start one in Baltimore? LA, Chicago. And yes, we want to be there. We're going to be there. Sure. We want to make sure we are doing our due diligence. Because I think sometimes when you try to do too much too fast, it can be a recipe to collapse. I don't want that. Sure. The dads don't deserve that, nor the kids. So do our due diligence here.
That makes sense with your 3 pillars, right? Right. So the bonding, the literacy, right? And the brotherhood, it totally makes sense. And in this moment in time where we know that community is incredibly important, like a strong bonded community versus, a quick and easy community. So I love the 0 to 12, that you have these 3 pillars that you really want to make sure that you all are really strengthening and enriching your initial location, but also sharing out.
Let me say this if I can, just to piggyback on that, because I don't want listeners or dads, librarians to say, oh, we have to, wait on them to expand to our city before we start getting dads together. You can talk to your library about a daddy and me story time. Like I said earlier, libraries, they host a lot of programs. When I would go to story times, with my daughter, I didn't really see a lot of dads. And I think that's because a lot of the times the story times were during the week. I know dads are busy working. And so we said, all right, Saturday mornings, we're having our library link ups. Dad's like, pull up, no excuse. But if, you go to your local library and say, hey, you guys think, you can start a daddy and me story time? I think that'll be a boom for your city and, your local community. But just know we are coming. We're going to be pulling up to Chicago, to the DMV, which is where I used to live, and a bunch of other cities across the nation. But just know you can take your child to the library and tell your friends, hey, what you doing this Saturday? You want to go read to the kids? We fully endorse and espouse that. So I wanted to make sure I got that on.
No, that was good, Khari. And I just want to follow up with a couple of things you said. Then we have some our fun questions as we wrap up. And so a few things that I want to sort of say and reiterate what you said is that, you are working. I love that you said you had a needs assessment. So really understand not just growing organically, but as you grow organically, looking at what you need, looking at what works, because that will help you to build a strong blueprint that you can move into other spaces. So kudos to you for even having the needs assessment and ideally an evaluation that's going to help you figure out what really works, like what components of your library link ups can move from space to space. So thanks for doing that as a program from the ground up organically. That doesn't happen all the time with nonprofits. So shout out to you for that. And then this idea of, what can you do in your community now today? So I actually do work with some libraries across Pennsylvania with teen reading lounge, where we're doing teen reading lounge, not necessarily father specific, but youth specific. But one of the things we had to be, creative during COVID, as you mentioned. So this idea, even if they can't do a daddy and me reading, they can, suggest a daddy and me reading. For the reading that already exists, they might see if there are fathers who can come in and do the reading then, right? So maybe there is a father who can come in during the regular story time. Like I know a librarian, she does story time with toddlers. But if I asked her tomorrow, she'd probably say, we don't often get fathers to do serial story time. So for the librarians who are listening and the teachers who are listening, you might have to ask the dads, right? You might not run into a Khari who's like, I read to my child. I've been taking my niece and nephew. I'm rock with the library. I'm a library fanatic. But it might be that as a teacher or as a wife or a grandmother, you might have to ask those fathers, those uncles, do you mind coming in and reading? And that way, and that might also draw other men to say, oh, I want to do that. So yes, we love that, it was your vision, you brought it out. But for those of us who are in other spaces and maybe trying to figure out how to at least do a little something while Khari is working and being careful about what they're doing in Atlanta, it might just be asking a mail or going to the library and asking about that programming. And right now, libraries are in the throes of planning for summer reading. I can tell you that right now. They are lining up guests. They're lining up curriculum. They're lining up professional development. So in terms of those fathers or those males who may not be comfortable reading, maybe not because of literacy, they may be shy. It might be great to say, we're going to recruit men to be the readers this summer. So this is a great time to knock on the doors of your libraries if you hadn't thought to do that. And our librarians, this is a great time to think about, oh, yeah, we could ask some men to come and do this versus just envisioning it as a female space. So I wanted to follow up on that. So thanks for the ideas and encouraging folks, don't wait if it's needed in your community, but keep an eye. And how can they follow you on social media? Because you said you've gone viral. For those who hadn't been following, what are your social media handles?
Yeah, so at the Library Dads on Instagram and TikTok. We are on Facebook, but we mainly operate on Instagram and TikTok right now. And our website is live. That went live last month, maybe at the top of this month, actually, but thelibrarydads.org. You can find
so librarydads.org and at the Library Dads on Instagram and TikTok and on Facebook, but more up-to-date data. You're going to find more up-to-date updates and posts on Instagram and TikTok.
Instagram is number one.
Awesome. So we always like to find out and ask about the joy quotient because this is raising joyful and resilient Black children. And we love the reading and the bonding do both, right? The bonding helps us to be joyful. And really the literacy is the resiliency, right? Learning how to read literally and figuratively. So we appreciate that. So we have a couple questions we want to ask you. And one of the questions we want to ask is, when we think about the time we spend with our children and the time that children, particularly as they get old enough to walk and move about, maybe sitting around, maybe during COVID, video gaming, chatting, social media with one another. What are some healthy, activities or strategies that maybe library link-up dads do to encourage healthy behavior, movement, or healthy eating? How do you manage that? Do you do anything with that?
Yes, great question. I can touch on both from a nutrition standpoint and just an active standpoint. So I'll start with the latter. We start all of our library link-ups with circle time. We get up and we're moving. And I want to shout out Mr. Prather. So he makes a lot of great kids music and he's really big on the activity component, right? And so he's out in the DMV. I want to shout him out because his music is what we, play to make sure we get the kids active before they sit down and, listen to story time. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the nutrition and health component, so ironically, we just had a library link up last month where we partnered with another nonprofit and our agenda title was Food and Fathers. And so the book we read was called What's in My Garden, and it talked about different natural foods. Yeah. And we had different activities that were curated for each age where fruit and vegetables were available for the kids to sort and play around with and learn more and explore. In the library, we did that inside of our story time room.
I love it.
Different stations. So yeah, definitely really big on that. There's so much you can learn in a book. It's like any topic I want to teach my child about, I can find a book on it.
Yes. One day you're going to tell us that you all are reading recipe books.
Yeah. I have multiple in the kitchen of our home.
Yeah. I mean, literally working with young people around food and nutrition and salsa, we taught them how to make salsa in the lab, if you will, in the classroom. And ever since then, working with young people on how to make salsa, because we had young people in this group who said they didn't like tomatoes, right? As do you eat ketchup? So this idea of connecting and understanding. So even reading those recipes to say, aha, this is what I'm eating, or this is what I can grow in my garden. No, I don't like tomatoes. So we made salsa and we made this and that. I was like, that's tomatoes. So this idea of, connecting with what we eat, understanding how it grows or what the nutritional value is really cool. And I think I've been making my own salsa at home ever since because of that time with young people. Absolutely. So I love it. Yeah. And you work with fathers. You mentioned also, fathers who saw some of your posts and how it changed their behavior and their outlook. We love that for their health and well-being as much as for the health and well-being of their children. So other than, healthy eating and cooking, as well as reading, we like to ask our guests, what's a joy quotient activity? We know reading is fundamental to, pun intended, we know reading is fundamental to the library link-ups. But if you had to recommend one thing that you think that our listeners could do to harness that joy with their children, what would that one thing be in addition to reading books with them?
That's to limit it to just one. I'll say in the age of AI, you could ask that question to ChatGPT and say, give me 100 things to do for my X-year-old child, 3, 10, 7. and they're going to give you a ton of ideas. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to just name just one. Like I said, reading is the floor for me, but I think really it comes down to creating experiences. I think that's what we all enjoy when we were kids. It's the experiences. Like, I played video games. To be honest, though, I can't remember a specific, I can't remember my best day on the video game, right? Mm-hmm. I can't remember my best day in front of the TV. And I watch TV, and I'm not against screen time and TVs and video games, but I don't really remember my most favorite time doing that, right? What I do remember is when my family took us on a cruise one time, right? And it was the Disney cruise. It was that experience. It was different. What I do remember is when we would drive down to Florida, to see my grandparents, and it was different. It was a new experience, something to look forward to. I do remember my dad taking me to, this is more of a teaching thing, because at the time I didn't really like it, but I remember my dad taking me to the Salvation Army, and he would preach on Monday nights at the Salvation Army, and I would go with them and help set up. And just looking back, it's like, wow, that time that we had together there, and I was able to see my dad in that light, giving back. I think it, in a sense, cultivated what we're seeing now, what's being transpired now in me, right? And leading the library dads and wanting to give back and have a heart for, our people. And so it's really the experiences that I think you just have to figure out, what's the best ways I can do that for my family. Everybody can't afford a cruise, but we can afford a library. So
because the library is $3.99.
$3.99.
Yes.
But I love that because you're talking about bonding. I mean, even when you gave the example, it's just about having that experience and bonding, driving down to Florida, bonding, being with your loved ones. Just that time and that experience is important.
That's what I remember. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even I'm not against sports for the dads. I remember my dad throwing the football outside with me. That was a great, memory, but it should never be sports or books or education. And I think it could be sports and really the other way around, because the books, the education, the literacy, that's really what, can take you places, statistically speaking. So yeah, that's something I do want to harp on too. I'm not against sports. I'm a sports journalist. So I want to make sure that we understand that the literacy is what's going to help set our kids up for success even more.
That's right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we'll have our listeners figure out what kind of experience can I cook up today, pun intended. So they might be cooking something up from the garden, or they might be deciding to take a walk around the block. Maybe, as you said, and you may not be able to go on a cruise, but you might be able to do a scavenger hunt, whether at home or in the community. So those experiences that are memorable, the bonding with your family, with your children. Thank you. Bonding. And I love that you mentioned, the teachable moments that as kids we may not like, but as adults we appreciate. So they're the fun memories, like a cruise, if you will, but then they're the memories of, I don't really feel like cutting these potatoes or going to set up for church. So we want to thank you for helping us to reinforce that both are needed for healthy parenting. We love that. We love that sharing. So thank you again, Khari, for spending time with us and telling us more about Library Linkups. And congratulations on marching into your first formal year. We look forward to following you on social media and seeing how your program grows. And we welcome you back anytime. So again, thanks for joining us and sharing all the valuable insights, your personal anecdotes, the factual information you've been sharing with us, the community that you're building with the little ones as well as with the parents, and just really thinking about not only that, the holistic diet, emotional self, physical self. I mean, really how to promote holistic wellness for Black families. And those Black families indeed do include Black fathers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome.
I want to, give you all your flowers. I love what you all are doing. I love what you stand for. Joy and resiliency. I mean, very two significant words that we should affirm over our children for sure. I was doing that this morning, actually. And so we got to continue to support this platform because what you all are doing is great work.
Oh, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We are trying to spread the joy and reinforce the resilience. So we thank you.
That is right.
We thank you for being a part of that so much. Khari. Well, we're Valerie Adams-Bass. I'm Dr. Valerie Adams-Bass and Dr. Sheretta Butler-Barnes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on Raising Joyful and Resilient Black Children next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.